In today's video we will discuss the top 10 HBCU NFL athletes of all time. Please make sure you subscribe to the top 10 jaw-dropping facts channel. Number 10, Shannon Sharpe. Tight end, Savannah State. Hall of Fame tight end Shannon Sharpe eclipsed his older brother's shadow pretty quickly. Sterling Sharpe was a record-setting wide receiver, though his career was cut short by a neck injury. Shannon did not have the same road as his elder brother either. Instead of being recruited and playing for a major college, Sterling was a standout at South Carolina. The younger Sharpe went to Division II Savannah State, an HBCU in Georgia. While at Savannah State, Sharpe rewrote the record book. Sharpe was a 4-year letter winner and was All-SIAC first team 3 years in a row. In 1989, Sharpe was SIAC Co-Player of the Year, Kodak Small School All-America First Team, and Georgia Player of the Year. Sharpe was the first player from Savannah State to receive invitations to the Blue and Gray Classic and East-West Shrine Game. Sharpe still owns the single-season record for receiving yards, touchdown and yards per catch at Savannah State. Sharpe became one of the first hybrid styles receiving tight ends in the game. Sharpe won 3 Super Bowls and retired as the all-time leader in receptions by a tight end. Number 9. Anius Williams. Cornerback, Southern University. Williams is proof that the evaluation system is not always perfect. A New Orleans native, Williams was an all-district safety, but he played on the same high school team with 3 future NFL players, Maurice Hurst, Kevin Lewis and Ashley Ambrose. Suffice it to say, scouts did not come and look at Williams. With no college offers, Williams decided to attend Southern University, where his brother Achilles went. Our parents always expected that we would go to college and get our degree, he explained. Playing football never crossed my mind, I was preparing for the rest of my life. Williams concentrated on getting his degree and did not play football at Southern until his junior year of the Arizona Cardinals, on his way to a Hall of Fame career. As a rookie, Williams led the NFC in interceptions. Williams made 8 Pro Bowls, a 3-time All-Pro First Team, and a Cardinals Ring of Honor member. During his 13-year career, Williams had 55 touchdowns, 23 fumble recoveries and 13 touchdowns. Williams was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2014. Number 8. Mel Blount. Cornerback, Southern University. One often overlooked aspect of the Steel Curtain defense is the secondary. Known for their hard-hitting physical style, the Steeler defense was one of the most athletic defenses of their era. It seemed as if everyone on the Steelers' defense could run. The secondary, led by Hall of Fame cornerback Mel Blunt, was such a player. Anytime you have a rule named after you, that is a guaranteed place in history or any player. The Mel Blunt rule was put in place to allow receivers release after 5 yards. The rule was enacted because teams could not throw against Blunt and the Steelers' secondary. After an All-American career at Southern, Blunt was a 3rd-round draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bill Nunn, Jr. was the catalyst behind Blunt coming to Pittsburgh. The Georgia native was a rare combination of size and speed, large enough to play safety, fast enough to play corner. Though Blunt is often remembered as a hard hitter, he had phenomenal ball skills. Blunt ended his career with 57 interceptions and had won every season of his 14-year career, leading the league in 1975 with 11 interceptions. Blunt was enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1989 and inducted into the Black College Football Hall of Fame in 2011. Number 7. David Deacon Jones, defensive end, South Carolina State and Mississippi Valley State. David Deacon Jones is the prototype for the modern defensive end in many ways. The Secretary of Defense. Played at 6'5" and 270 pounds. Many defensive ends play at that size today. Jones was explosive off of the line of scrimmage, as many defensive ends are today. Jones coined the word sack and perfected many pass rush maneuvers defensive ends use today, including the head slap, which was banned. However, Jones' football journey to stardom and the Hall of Fame began rather rocky. Growing up in the segregated South, Jones was all too familiar with Jim Crow segregation. Jones, a standout high school athlete in Eatonville, Florida, went to South Carolina State to play football. Instead, Jones had his scholarship revoked after participating in a civil rights protest. Jones followed an assistant coach to Mississippi Valley State in Itta and played his final season there. A Rams scout who was evaluating running backs saw Deacon Jones, at over 270 pounds, outrunning the running backs. Jones was drafted in the 14th round by the Los Angeles Rams in 1961, joining Lamar Lundy, Roosevelt Rosie Greer and Merlin Olsen to form the fearsome foursome, most dominant defensive lines in NFL history. Though the sack was not an official statistic during Jones' playing days, he is unofficially credited with 173.5 sacks, including 24.5 in one season. Number 6. Robert Brazile, defensive end/outside linebacker, Jackson State University. Brazile's nickname, Dr. Doom, should get him on this list. However, much like Deacon Jones, who precedes him on this list, Brazile changed how his position is played. Before Lawrence Taylor became arguably the greatest outside linebacker in football history, Brazile terrorized quarterbacks. Brazile played for Jackson State's talented 1974 team. 3 players from that team, Brazile, Walter Payton, and Jackie Slater, are all enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Starting as a tight end, Brazile switched to linebacker in 1972 to take advantage of his combination of size and speed. Besides, you couldn't call a tight end Dr. Doom. While at Jackson State, Brazile was an All-American in 1974, setting the school record for tackles in one season, 129, and received an invitation to the Senior Bowl. Brazile also led the SWAC in interceptions the same season. Brazile was impressive enough for the Oilers to draft him 6th overall in the 1975 NFL Draft. Bum Phillips, who drafted Brazile, switched to a 3-4 defense, which fit Brazile perfectly. Phillips and Brazile popularized sending the outside linebacker off of the edge to rush the passer years before Lawrence Taylor perfected the art. Unofficially, Brazile has 48 career sacks. Brazile was not simply a pass rush specialist. The Jackson State standout ended his career with 13 interceptions and 14 fumble recoveries. Number 5. Doug Williams, quarterback, Grambling State. There is a legend that before Super Bowl 22, quarterback Doug Williams was asked, "How long have you been a black quarterback?" Williams has always been a quarterback of firsts throughout his career. White establishment likes to talk down on the black quarterbacks by saying they are not smart enough or disciplined enough to play quarterback. Williams was the first black quarterback to start and win a Super Bowl. Williams' firsts did not start there, however. Like many high school quarterbacks of his day, Williams was asked by many larger schools to switch positions. The Zachary High School standout wanted to play quarterback, and legendary head coach Eddie Robinson let him do so. While at Grambling, Williams won 36 games and 3 SWAC titles. Williams led the NCAA in passing yards, total yards, touchdown passes, and yards per play as a senior. This stellar season led to Williams becoming the second black quarterback, Sandy Stevens, 1961, to finish top 5 in Heisman voting. The only NFL coach to work Williams out was a young offensive coordinator named Joe Gibbs. As a result, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, under Gibbs' advice, picked Williams in the first round, making Williams the first black quarterback to be a first-round draft pick. While in Tampa, Williams led the Buccaneers to their first playoff appearances and first conference title game in franchise history. After a stint in the USFL, the only coach to call Williams after the USFL folded, Joe Gibbs, who was now the head coach of the Washington football team. Doug would go on to win Super Bowl 22. The rest is history. Not a bad series of firsts. Number 4. Jackie Slater, offensive tackle, Jackson State University. Jackie Slater, another member of Jackson State's famed 1974 team, is one of the great offensive linemen in NFL history. Slater did not play much during his first 3 years in the league, but in 1979, Slater started and did not relinquish his role until he retired in 1995. Slater was the anchor of one of the best offensive lines of the 1980s. Alongside fellow Pro Bowl linemen Ken Hill and Dennis Hara, Slater was the leader of an offensive line that paved the way for record-breaking running back Eric Dickerson. Slater was a physical run blocker and graceful pass blocker. In 1979, his first year as a starter, the Rams went to the Super Bowl, and Slater held Steelers defensive lineman L.C. Greenwood without a sack. In 1983, the Rams allowed a league-low 23 sacks, while paving the way for Eric Dickerson's rookie record 1,808 rushing yards. Slater's best playoff game came against the Philadelphia Eagles and fellow Hall of Famer Reggie White. Slater held White without a sack. 1989 was White's fifth of 9 years with double-digit sacks. Slater's longevity was unmatched when he retired. Slater's 259 games played was most all-time when he retired. Bruce Matthews broke the streak in 1999. Slater was the first to play 20 years with one franchise. Darrell Green, Washington, Jason Hanson, Detroit, and Tom Brady, New England, are the only others with 20 years with one franchise. Slater was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2001. Number 3. Junius Buck Buchanan. Defensive end. Grambling State University. Before the NFL actively began drafting black players, especially those from HBCUs, the AFL was a haven for black players good enough to play professional football but not scouted or drafted by the NFL. By the 1960s, the NFL would draft and sign a smattering of black players, but not to the extent the AFL did. One example of this disparity is Junius Buck Buchanan. An Alabama native, Buchanan played for legendary Grambling State head coach Eddie Robinson. During his Grambling career, Buchanan was an All-NAIA selection and 4-year letter winner. Buchanan is one of 4 Robinson players to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. After Buchanan's career at Grambling was over, he was drafted by both the AFL and the NFL. While the Giants selected Buchanan in the 19th round, the Kansas City Chiefs selected him with the first overall pick. Buchanan was the first black football player selected first overall in professional football. Much like Deacon Jones, Buchanan would be an imposing figure even in today's game. At 6'7" and 272 pounds, Buck would be one of the more dominant forces in the game today. Buchanan was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1992. Number 2. Walter Payton. Running back. Jackson State University. Affectionately known as Sweetness, Walter Payton could lay claim to being both the greatest college football player and professional football player of all time, if not for the player first on this list. When Payton left Jackson State and the NFL, he was the all-time leading rusher in both. Though Payton was a standout running back at Columbia High School in Mississippi, he received no SEC offers. Payton's only Division I offer came from Kansas State. So instead of leaving Mississippi, Payton decided to play at Jackson State, where Eddie, his older brother, played. Payton had an immediate impact while at Jackson State, rushing for 651 yards and 5 touchdowns as a freshman. As a junior, Payton led the Tigers in rushing and led the nation in scoring. Not only did Payton score touchdowns while at JSU, but he also kicked extra points and field goals. When Payton graduated in 1975, he had the NCAA record for scoring, 464 points, and held 9 different Jackson State records, including rushing yards and touchdowns. Payton was an All-American and All-SWAC selection. In addition, the FCS Division I AA Player of the Year award was named after him. During Payton's professional career, Sweetness was a Super Bowl champion, 9-time Pro Bowl selection, and all-time leading rusher. Tragically, Payton died of a rare form of liver disease in 1999. Number 1. Jerry Rice. Wide receiver. Mississippi Valley State University. It is not hard to understand why Jerry Rice is first on this list. Jerry Rice is the greatest wide receiver and arguably the greatest football player in the game's history. No one had a prime of a career longer than Rice, and he holds numerous NFL records on his way to Canton. Many people might not know that Jerry World Rice might be the greatest collegiate wide receiver of all time as well. Rice set numerous NCAA records during his 3 years as the primary wide receiver for the Mississippi Valley State Delta Devils. Rice acquired the nickname World because he could catch anything thrown in his direction. 1982 was Rice's first year playing with Willie Totten in head coach Archie Cooley's Satellite Express spread offense. That season Rice had 66 receptions for 1,113 yards and 7 touchdowns. But, as great a season as that was, the Totten and Rice connection was not done. So before the 1983 season, Cooley began experimenting with a no-huddle offense where Totten would call the plays at the line of scrimmage. It would pay off for Rice. That season Rice set records for receptions, 102, receiving yards, 1,450 and receptions in one game, 24. 1984 would be even more dominant for Rice and the Delta Devils. MVSU averaged a staggering 57 points per game that season and Rice set more records. As a senior, Rice broke his own receptions, 112, and receiving yards, 1,845, while setting the record for receiving touchdowns, 27. Rice finished his career with 301 receptions, for 1,693 receiving yards and 50 receiving touchdowns, a mark which stood until 2006. Rice was MVP of the Blue and Gray Classic and an All-American, finishing 9th in the Heisman Trophy balloting. Rice was not only a record setter as a pro, he set records in college as well. I hope you enjoyed our top 10 HBCU NFL athletes of all time. Please leave a comment below for anyone you think we missed.